Welcome to another edition of Influence, the global podcast that shines a spotlight on the influencer marketing industry. My name is Gordon Glenister. For those of you that don't know who I am, I'm a keynote speaker, trainer, and consultant in the sector and published author on influencer marketing strategy. Influence is also a proud member of the Marketing Podcast Network, where you can listen to other amazing influencer and marketing related shows. But before we start, please don't forget to subscribe to the show just to make sure that you don't miss a future episode. Now, today I'm talking with Aliza Freud, who's the CEO of all women influencer platform called She Speaks, about the benefits of an always on approach to influencer campaigns. And Lisa starts by telling me a bit about how she started out with American Express. Here's what she had to say.
Sure. Well, I am very much accidentally in this space, although, as we were also talking about before we started, accidentally in this space for a very long time. I was at American Express, so I've only worked two places my entire career. I worked for the first half of my career at American Express, doing all different kinds of marketing, product management, all of that good stuff, and really thought that there was a better way to get insights, to get research and insights from women. And I was seeing digital as an emerging platform. This is back in 2007. And digital seemed to be an emerging platform that I thought was a great way to actually cull opinions from women about different products and services. So when She Speaks launched, we launched as a research platform. And that's what the platform was originally built to do. It was built with quantitative and qualitative research, but we needed women to join our panel. Like you still need a research panel, right? So when we started, we put out a call and said, "Hey, we have a couple of brands, a skincare brand, a hair care brand, a food brand. They're interested in getting women's opinions about these products. Would you be willing to join our community and try the product? We'll send it to you and give us feedback." And we just were overwhelmed by the response. And we grew the community very quickly. What we started to realize, though, was because when you join our community, we have a CRM platform that gathers lots of information about you. So this is, again, back in, we're now talking 2008, 2009. Women are telling us, "Oh, I have a blog," and we were like, "Whoa, wait a second. We don't want you to write about this on your blog. Don't talk to anybody about this." Or, you're very active in social media. Don't write about this on social media. So after a few times of having to say to people, "Hey, we want you to be in the test group for this, but you can't write about it anywhere. You can't talk to people about it publicly," we thought, well, maybe there's an opportunity. So we actually started to evolve and not only do the research component, but then we went to our clients and said, "Listen, we've got these women who have great, huge followings. They've got a blog with 40,000 people who read it a month. Like, we've got a great audience here. What about using the audience for marketing purposes once the product is ready for prime time?" And that's how we started to get involved in influencer marketing. Again, this is before it was called influencer marketing. It wasn't really called that in earnest, I think, until 2015, and that was when YouTube emerged as the platform with lots of influencers on it. It is still a hugely powerful platform with influencers, although I think a lot of brands tend to ignore YouTube right now. Certainly, they're focusing much more these days on Instagram and TikTok. But the platforms have evolved, but we have sort of stayed the same in the sense that we have this great community. We have 250,000 women now who are part of our community. They reach 300 million people. So we are able to tap into that community to give them the opportunity to still try the products and then provide content, create content, push that content out.
No, it's fascinating, isn't it? And I think so often when we people talk about influencer marketing, they so often think about running an influencer campaign, which is about promoting a product or service. Yet actually, how valuable is it for brands to get real insights, not only from the influencers, but of course from the influencers' audiences? And I
Yeah.
sometimes think that's been missing. So what you were doing those early years of hugely valuable. Some of the smart brands I've seen actually, like the Nikes of this world, are actually now starting to realize not only can we get people to sample products, but we can actually get them involved in the product design, which I think
Yes.
is absolutely fascinating, don't you?
Yes.
And in fact, there was an agency that I was speaking to on a podcast last year, who is a product called Puricane, which is a sweetener, a sugar sweetener. And what they decided to do was invite a number of influencers over to Brazil because they were going to launch it in South America, a slightly different type of market. And they got the influencers to really get involved in the process of this 3-day workshop. And whilst they were there, the influencers were also reaching out to their followers to get their opinions. Because when the actual product came to be launched, how powerful is that? Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
They've almost been involved in the process right in the early stages and then through. So I
Yes.
think we're probably going to see more of this. Are we? Do you think?
I hope so. And what I will tell you, if you think about the value that is in that ecosystem that you just described, you are not only are you getting the opportunity to get these opinion leaders who are providing and providing you with insights for your product and service, you're getting access to their audience who and the knowledge that those influencers have of their audience. I think that is one thing that is a missing piece for a lot of brands and how they think about the value of influencer. I think brands understand the value that an influencer has because they think about it as media, right? They're used to buying media. Think
Right,
about
right.
what agencies and advertisers have been doing for a very long time. They've been buying media, so they think about influencers. Okay, well, these people have access to an audience. It's media. What do I get for that media? The thing that you get when working with an influencer and this feedback loop that you get access to is you get the collective knowledge of that community that the influencer has built and the influencer themselves in what they know about their community. Influencers understand their audience better than any brand does.
Absolutely.
There's just we've seen it across brands, we've seen it across categories, we've seen it across. And I'm not saying that we work with very smart marketers. It's not that they don't understand their target, but they don't interact with their target every single day and engage in a conversation back and forth, see how they're reacting to a piece of content, letting them talk to them about that piece of content. You can't help but learn about your audience if you're an influencer and you're doing that day in and day out. So that's one thing that I think is incredibly valuable about working with an influencer that brands should not undervalue. That influencer can understands their audience in a way that you do not. And also think about the way that an influencer is also a consumer. And at the end of the day, there's somebody who, if it's a good fit for your brand. Okay, here I am. I'm drinking Dunkin' Donuts coffee right now. I love Dunkin' Donuts coffee. If I'm an influencer, I am going to, and I'm working with Dunkin' Donuts. I have not only my understanding of my audience, but I also have my understanding of your brand as a consumer of that brand. And the combination of me knowing my audience and me being a consumer of your product, what that's going to do is it's going to allow me to create content that is benefit driven content. And I have, because I worked on the marketing side, the brand marketing side for a long time, I understand this, having suffered myself from this affliction. As a marketer, you tend to get very focused on the features of your product. and not as much on the benefits. And I think what consumers, influencers being consumers, what they do is they think about your product from a benefit standpoint, meaning, how does this product make my life better, easier, more interesting, whatever it is. And that's what they focus on. And that's why that content does so well. And so the ability for a brand to tap into the influencer and get the knowledge that they have of their audience, what their audience thinks, and then that combination of understanding your product as a consumer of that product, that's where I think you get the magic that happens between influencers and brands.
Yeah, no, I agree totally. I mean, the other thing I think is makes a big difference is the emotional attachment that an influencer has with its audience, which is unlike a brand. And I remember a stat that I saw a little while ago from, I think it was Gartner Research, that said amongst Gen Zs, they trust traditional advertising to the tune of just 1%, which is frighteningly low. And yet they trust the opinions of their influencer friends, their YouTubers, the people that is making sense of the product, is actually almost like creating it. It's like a fashion influencer has curated a style of clothes specifically for you if you're following them. And I know some of them will go out and select different styles for their audience, which you just don't get that level of detail and focus, do you, with a brand campaign? So no, it's really fascinating. And you, of course, have worked on some fabulous campaigns, haven't you? Prudential, Coca-Cola, Reckitt, and others. Are there any sort of standout ones that you thought, wow, that was an amazing campaign for any particular reason?
Well, I mean, we get to work on a lot of great stuff. So I'll say that I think we've had a lot of campaigns that have been great for different reasons. I'll give you a recent example because I think it's a category that is more difficult. It's relatively, I'm going to just say on a relative scale, because we work on food brands, we work on beauty brands, we work on all sorts of consumer packaged goods, and financial services is another category we work on. It is relatively easier to create content on behalf of a chocolate brand, let's say, than it is a financial services brand.
Exactly.
But the key is understanding, well, okay, what is this product? What is this service all about? And why? And how do I take insights about this category and be successful for the brand? So I'll give you an example of that. And because I actually just had talked about this publicly with our client, we work with Fidelity. It's one of our clients, and they are really trying to get women more engaged in the process of financial stability, having good retirement, having good savings, investments, all of that. And historically, it is investments and money have been topics that women tend to shy away from. And this is, this is not me making this up. This is based on research, lots of research and historical data that shows that this is not a topic that women tend to want to engage with. And a study came out, I know, that said that recently that women would rather talk about anything. They'd rather talk about sex, any like very, very, things that you wouldn't think they'd want to talk. They'd rather talk about that than money. So
Yet,
it is a
yet the
topic that
decision,
historically,
I was going to say, yet the decisions about purchasing in the home are massively made by women, aren't they? Is it
over
80%?
over 80% of the decisions of what to of purchases overall are made by women. And so, yes, women have spending power, and but also, do they have investment power? And that's really what Fidelity was looking to change. And so they had created this great program where they were giving women access to free resources, all this information, seminars, events, things to help them become more comfortable and more knowledgeable. So, but the key was, how do you use an influencer? We knew that influencers could be useful because they had the right audience, but how do you get them to create the right message so that their audience would want to engage in this topic that we know that they don't want to talk about, or they historically have not wanted to talk about. So I think one of the key things was using influencers as almost like gatekeepers, right? So it's a topic that women don't historically feel comfortable talking about. Using an influencer who they're already familiar with, who they already have a dialogue with, to have that person be and sort of open the door for them to say, listen, this is a topic that's really important and you can benefit greatly from. That was, I think, a really important element of it. But then the next thing was, all right, well, then what do they talk about? How do you even start this conversation? So we just said, okay, listen, like, what's the whole value? What's the value of having investments and having stability, a stable, 401k and retirement, all of that, having all of that? It's so that you can, do the things you want. So you can buy a home, that you can go on vacations, that you can live a life that you want. So that's what we had the influencers talk about. We had influencers who were having massive life events. I remembered back from my days at American Express, when were people the most likely to get a new credit card, to want to open a bank account? It's when they had a life event. They were getting married, they were having a child, they were buying a new home. These events were associated with when they were thinking about money. So we had the influencers. We chose influencers who had the right audience, but could also authentically talk about an event in their life, a one that they were already talking to their audience about. That they could then say, listen, you all know I'm getting married, right? Did you know that we're buying a home? So buying a home is a huge investment, and so that was the gateway to the conversation and the content, and it has been a very successful campaign. And
Yeah.
that's the trick, is really understanding what is it that the influencer, what does the who does the influencer have in their audience, and how do you authentically take the content that you're trying to create and weave it into a conversation that's already being had.
Yeah, and that's what I love about influencer marketing, isn't it? They tell the story in a way that sometimes brands just cannot. They're all about the transactional sale sometimes, whereas actually, if you're being subtly guided or referred, it feels less of and particularly if it's somebody that you know, like, and trust, it feels so much more sort of comforting for people to make that
Yes.
decision. And
Yes.
particularly when you start to see the comments, because it's different if you're talking to me about a product or service and I go and buy it, but in a public environment that's positive, there's almost the momentum of that can happen, isn't it, when somebody says, oh, I'm glad you asked that question, that was really useful for me, oh, I think so too, and so on. You get that momentum of of, conversation, don't you, which I think is really valuable for the brand as well as for the influencer to shape
That's
what
right.
they're
That's
so
right.
that's
And that community, the community that's created by doing that, and for women in this topic that we were just talking about as it relates to finances, community is something that actually works very well, because women are willing to say, oh, you had that question too, I have that question. And there is a community element that works very, very well. And that's where Fidelity was very smart with what they were creating community for women. And what our job was to find the right influencers to help shepherd women into this community, and it's worked very well.
I suppose I've got to ask this question. Why did you focus your platform and your business entirely on women?
Okay, well, this goes back to my origin story of working at American Express. You may know this. American Express, historically, very old brand, and very male dominated, and the brand itself was much more of a male oriented brand when I started there in the late 90s. And they even had that centurion, that warrior on the card. If you remember the American Express,
Yeah.
the charge cards, and so I can't tell you in my 10 years there how many times I was pulled into a task force that was like the topic of the task force was what to do about women. And it was clear that the company, and even a company like American Express that was so male oriented in terms of the consumer base, the customer base, that if a brand like American Express had to say to itself, what do we do about women? And then sitting in these meetings and hearing people say, well, what if we made the card pink? Like if we just made the card pink, would
Oh
that
my
work?
God.
That I thought, okay, two things occurred to me. One, a company like American Express cares about what to do about women, then who doesn't, right? Because it's such a male oriented brand, but they care about women, then lots of brands must care about what women think. And two, and not just American Express, but American Express in this instance, they're not getting it right. It's not about pinkwashing things. It's about how do you understand what motivates this person, this individual who happens to be a woman, to want to engage with you and your brand. And that's why I think influencers work so well, because to your point, storytelling of influencers is so powerful. What do you talk about in stories? You talk about the benefits of things, like why do you like this, why does it work in your life? That combination of influencers who can tell really good stories, and the fact that as women, we tend to want to talk to each other about what, like, if I see a woman who is doing something that or has a piece, a clothing item or something that I'm like, wow, I love that, she doesn't say, oh, thank you. She says, thanks, this is where I got it and what it costs and where you can get it. I mean, that's the conversation.
Yeah,
So it seemed to
it's a
me
natural fit
that it
for
was a great
women as well,
opportunity.
isn't it? It really is, for the reasons that we just explained. So I guess really, to the point that we were starting at the beginning of the podcast was, why should brands really not just do influencer marketing as a one-off, but perhaps consider it as an always-on process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the way I think about this again goes back to my days working in marketing at a big company. You want to have um, frequency of message, and I think that when you find an influencer, if they have the right audience and they have credibility in the topic that you want, and the credibility can be what I just described with fidelity. It's not like we went out and found financial advisors to be the influencers in this. We could have, but that's not what we did. But if you find people who can get the message out that you care to convey to that audience, and they have the audience, you want frequency of that message. And a one-time post or even two posts, they're good. And I'm not saying that there's not a time and a place. Of course, there's a time and a place to do one-off campaigns. We do a ton of one-off campaigns. However, when you're thinking about the reach and then multiplying it by a frequency number, you want to have frequency, because it does take people several times, several exposures, or it can take people several exposures to decide that they're interested and want to go and purchase that product. If you think about the purchase funnel.
Well, indeed. I mean, and don't think that just because somebody's got 30 or 40,000 followers, that the followers are going to see all of that influencer's content all of the time, because we know how the algorithm works. There's only going to be a percentage of it that is seen. So the more times that the brand is being exposed through that influence, the better chance of getting some form of conversion or reaction as well.
Yes.
So no, fascinating. So what does the future look like for She Speaks? 'Cause also, I forgot to mention, of course, you're a great podcaster, aren't you? How long's the podcast been going?
The podcast is a passion project that we started during the pandemic.
Really?
The podcast is called She Speaks How She Does It, and it's basically we feature influencers and other women who we get the chance to work with, that we that we come across in our travels, and they share a particular area of expertise that we think would be inspiring to the audience. And it really was born out of a realization that during the thick of the pandemic, so the podcast started in late 2020. And the goal, what we saw was that women were feeling stuck, uninspired, and overwhelmed, and just very burnt out. And this is early burnout. Right now, everyone's talking about burnout, but we were seeing it because it's one of the things we do is we ask women how they're feeling and what's going on with them. So we thought, well, if people who are stuck, if you're stuck, what could help you? Can't leave your home, what can you do? What if we shared stories of other women who were experiencing, had experienced failures and then successes, and that provided a source of inspiration. And it really was something that was meant to be a short-term thing, but it gained momentum really quickly. And we had listeners kind of contacting us and saying, here's someone else I want you to talk to. And so it just kind of grew from there. And it's another way. I mean, I think of our mission as a company as building a platform for women and handing them the microphone. That's really like, it's their stage, and our job is to make sure that we get people to listen to what they have to say. The podcast is another way that we do that.
No, it's fantastic. No, I mean, obviously, I'm a bit like that with my podcast. I publish it every 2 weeks, and I think you think about how many podcasts there are now. It's phenomenal. I mean, billions
Mhm,
almost. But when
mhm,
you've got somebody listening in this sort of attention economy, to have somebody in your ear, particularly if somebody's going around for a walk and you're listening to a podcast, that attention focus for a brand or for a community is so powerful, isn't it?
mhm.
I mean, I've got some lakes near where I live, in the UK, and I remember during the pandemic, I often would walk around and listen to some podcasts, and I for an hour, and I thought, wow, this is really strong stuff. Where would you
Yes.
come out of time?
Yes. And
Yeah, yeah. When we're on our phone, we're scrolling, and yet I'm an hour on a podcast sometimes.
yes. I think that that's a great thing to point out, and why the podcasting medium I think has just exploded. It's a way for people to go deep on something that gives them, and it's not fully committing like reading a book, but it's letting them go deep in a way that they don't get just scrolling through social media. So I think that's a great point. I do the same. I exercise to my podcast. I have my list of podcasts I listen to, and you get into it's a great opportunity to kind of just get lost in another thought and another topic.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. So, just to finish with, then, what's the future look like? What's the next thing on the agenda? Anything exciting you've got planned, or any new additions you're going to add with the platform, or areas of it? I mean, how much of the audience is an American, by the way, just out of interest? Is it mostly? I don't.
The
Mostly.
majority of our audience is US based. And I would say that although we have worked with influencers outside of the US, but the majority of the audience of the women who are part of our community are US based. And I would say that, for us, we are just going, if you think about what I said before about our job being to build the stage for women and bring that audience in so that people hear what they have to say. That's our mission, and we'll be expanding as we go. So the podcast is a relatively new area for us, but we also will be doing a lot more in the arena of really making sure that the voices and what our community, what women have to say, is being amplified. So we are finding new and great ways to do that. We do, that includes not just the organic of our influencers pushing out this content and creating this content, but it's expanding into other mediums. So that's what's really fun and exciting for us, is to see where are the new places you can push that. because our mission has always been the same, but the platforms change, social platforms change, and the vehicles for how we deliver the content change. But we've always been very close to that one mission, and then it's just a matter of how do we make sure that we make that stage as big as we can and the audience as large as possible.
Great. No, it's lovely to hear. And so, where can people find out more about you?
Well, they can, if they want to come to check out She Speaks, they can do that at shespeaks.com. And me, I'm Aliza Freud on pretty much all social media. I'm LinkedIn, on Instagram, on all of the platforms. I'm Aliza Freud. So hopefully, they will be able to find me in one of those ways.
Right. Lisa, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for joining us on the Influence Global podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That's it for another edition of Influence. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and give me your feedback, Gordon at gordonglenister.com, or you can follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, where you can also ask me a question. If you're able to give us a 5-star review, we really do appreciate it. And also, if you want help in creating an influencer marketing strategy, or you want to join the influencer marketing roundtable event, which we host every Wednesday morning on Zoom, then head over to gordonglenister.com where you can find out more about the details. And if you want to find out more about our shows and many others, go over to the MPN, the Marketing Podcast Network, and you can find them all there. Thanks as always to my producer Neil Whiteside from Freedom One. And until next time, from me, Gordon Glenister, it's bye for now.